back to Focal Point AFR Talk, this Monday edition. You are listening to Focal Point, the home of high-definition radio. More content per cubic inch of air than any other place on your radio dial. And one of the things we talked about in the opening segment, looking at Paul's example, is that it's absolutely perfectly appropriate for Christians to stand on their legal rights and to stand on the Constitution, to stand on the legal guarantees that we have of freedom of religion, speech, conscience, and assembly. Now, what Paul was doing when he was in legal trouble, he stood on his legal rights as a Roman. He didn't cite Scripture. He cited Roman law. In the same way, if our rights are trampled, it's perfectly appropriate for us to imitate the example of Paul. Remember, he said to us, imitate me as I imitate Christ. So what we see here is perfectly appropriate for Christians to do, to press our legal claim for our constitutional rights. This is what Paul does over and over again in the book of Acts. And the example there is it's perfectly appropriate for us to do the same thing. That's why it's important that we know the Constitution, just as we know the Scriptures. We are to study the Scriptures. We are to study the Constitution. And that's why, I describe a patriot, a true patriot in my mind, is somebody that has a Bible in one hand and a Constitution in the other, because we need both. The Bible is our guide and our rule for all of life. Constitution is our Bible, if you will, or our rule for our political life. Now, they're not on the same plane. Don't misunderstand me. Constitution's not inspired by God in the same way that the Scriptures are. We know that the Constitution is not inspired by God like the Scriptures are because we've had to amend it 27 times. Scriptures have never had to be amended one single solitary time. So they're not on the same plane, but there is an authority that the Constitution has. We need to understand what it teaches because that's the basis of our rights as American citizens. So just as Paul was well-versed in Roman law, and he stood on Roman law when his rights under Roman law were being violated, so it's appropriate and right for us to understand the Constitution, to understand what our rights are under the Constitution, and then when the time is right to press for those when those rights are under assault. Now, this is clip number 2, Rob. Here's a little spot that Hobby Lobby has prepared. Hobby Lobby is, as you're aware, Christian-run business. They close on Sunday so that their employees can have a day to worship God and to spend time with their families so they can have a day of rest. So this is Hobby Lobby, founded on Christian principles, run by Christian principles, operated by Christian principles. Is no question about that whatsoever. Not even people in the Obama administration have a question about whether this is a Christian-run business or not. But the Obama administration has said, look, you have to pay or provide for insurance that covers abortion-causing drugs for your employees. And Hobby Lobby says, no, we can't do that. We are Christians. We're a Christian-run business. We value the sanctity of human life. That would violate our conscience. It would violate our Christian beliefs. It would violate our most deeply held religious convictions. To do that, we will not do it. And the Obama administration said, well, that's going to be a fine of $1.3 million a day. Hobby Lobby says, we don't care. We're not going to do it. And so they went to court to press their claims under the Constitution of the United States of America to the free exercise of religion. Now, what the Obama administration has done, and this is why it's important to understand the Constitution, because this is the source of the rights on which we stand. Now, listen, be very careful on this, because this is very, very important from a constitutional standpoint. Not the first time we've talked about it on this program, but it may be the first time you've been listening when we talk about this thing. Now, what President Obama wants to do in his administration is they want to get you to think that when the Constitution talks about freedom of religion, what it's talking about is what you do inside the four walls of your church between 11 and noon on Sunday. That's why President Obama, when he talks about the First Amendment, he doesn't talk about the free exercise of religion. You listen to him. He will not talk about the free exercise of religion. What he will talk about is freedom of worship, as if the only thing that the Constitution protects is your freedom to worship God on Sundays from 11 to noon in the way that you think best. Obama essentially is saying, look, whatever you do in your church building on Sunday morning between 11 and noon, that's your business, nobody else's business. I'm not going to tell you who to worship. I'm not going to tell you how to worship. I'm not going to tell you what you can teach in there. I'm not going to tell you what you can believe in there. I'm not going to tell you what books you can read in there. So that hour, that belongs to you. But the other 167 hours belong to me. That's in essence what President Obama is saying. And I get to tell you how you will use those other 167 hours a week. I will tell you what liberties and rights you have during those other 167 hours a week. And you do not have First Amendment rights to the free exercise of religion those other 167 hours a week. That's essentially what President Obama is saying. But the Constitution, and this is why Obama won't quote the Constitution guarantees the free exercise of religion. It does not guarantee freedom of worship. It guarantees the free exercise of religion. Now, worship is one of the things that we do in exercising our religious convictions, so it's covered, but that's not the specific topic or purpose of the First Amendment. It is to protect the free exercise of religion. That's 168 hours a week. That's 24 hours a day. That's 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Every American citizen has a constitutional, unalienable, God-given right to the free exercise of religion, including the way in which he conducts his business. That is a constitutional right, and that's what President Obama is trying to challenge. And Hobby Lobby has gone to court to challenge the president. They're absolutely right to do this. You know, we praise God for organizations like Alliance Defending Freedom, like Liberty Counsel, Matt Staver and his group, like ACLJ, Jay Sekulow and his group, Liberty Institute with Kelly Shackelford down in Texas, Pacific Justice Institute with Brad Dacus out on the West Coast. We value all the work they do because they're doing God's work just as Paul stood on his legal rights. So that's what these organizations are doing for us as believers, and never more critical a time to do that than right now. Now, here's a little spot that Hobby Lobby has developed to communicate to the American people what's at stake here in their case, their legal challenge against President Obama. Let's listen.
Hi, my name is Mandy Broadfoot. I'm a wife, a new mom, and I've been an employee at Hobby Lobby for 5 years now. Our company was founded by David Green in 1970, making small picture frames in a garage. We now have over 500 stores in 41 states, and we employ over 22,000 people across the country. The Green family built Hobby Lobby on biblical principles and their strong Christian faith and values. So when the federal government's Health and Human Services mandate threatened to force them to include abortion-inducing drugs in their health insurance plan, the Green family felt compelled to file a lawsuit in defense for their religious freedom. They are represented in this case by the Becket Fund for Religious Liberty. The Green family believes that life begins at conception, when an egg is fertilized. FDA guidelines clearly state that the morning after and the week after pill may prevent a fertilized egg from implanting in the womb. This aborts a fertilized egg. The Green family has no objection to preventative birth control, and they will continue to cover this in their comprehensive health insurance plan for their employees. Hobby Lobby and the Green family do not wish to control the actions of their employees, nor do they want to impose their beliefs on anyone. They respect the religious convictions of all Americans, even those with different views. They are simply asking for that same respect with regards to their religious freedom. Religious freedom is one of our most cherished rights as Americans. We hope you agree. Thank you for listening.
So that's Hobby Lobby saying, look, this really is about the Constitution. It is about religious liberty. It's about the free exercise of religion. And that ad is exactly right. That is precisely what is at stake here. And on the issue of contraception, again, she said, look, Hobby Lobby's not opposed to contraception in general. It's opposed to contraception that can cause abortions. I'm looking at an article here from CNS News. This is from January 21st. I've had this in the stack here for a little while. But it's on the subject of this contraception mandate and the fact that it includes emergency contraceptives. And see, that's the issue. President Obama, Obamacare, saying you have to provide a morning after or week after emergency contraception. After the deed has been done, after insemination may have taken place, after fertilization may have taken place, you have got to provide a contraceptive pill that will terminate that pregnancy. You got to do it. You have an obligation to do it under law. If you don't, we're going to fine you $1.3 million a day. That's how obscene Obamacare is. That's just one picture. I mean, the whole thing, ladies and gentlemen, is an obscenity. Obamacare from beginning to end, all 2,700 pages, is an obscenity. And this just highlights, this is the most obscene part of Obamacare requires an employer, a Christian employer, to provide a pill that will kill a baby carried by one of his employees. That's demonic, satanic in nature. Here's what the CNS story says. Any discussion of Obamacare's contraception mandate must include the fact that the most commonly used emergency contraceptives can cause the death of a human embryo, according to a new report by the Washington-based Charlotte Lazier Institute. Quote, numerous studies have shown that the most popular emergency contraceptives can cause the death of embryos. And this is Susan Wills is the one who wrote this. She's an associate scholar at the Institute. She pointed out that in 1965, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists adopted an Orwellian newspeak definition of conception. When you hear the word conception, what do you think it means? To you and me, it means when the egg is fertilized by the sperm. That's when conception takes place. That's when fertilization takes place. That's when human life begins. But all the way back in 1965, it's like they saw what was coming with the advent of the pill, which came in about 1960. They now define conception as the implantation of a fertilized ovum. So it's not when it's conceived and travels down the fallopian tube and then is implanted in the womb of the uterus. It's when it's implanted. That may take 7 to 10 days. So they're saying, look, for 7 days, that little human being in its earliest stage, it's fair game. And you've got to provide a pill to your patient or your employees that will kill that little tiny human being. And Susan Wills points out the whole purpose of this redefinition of pregnancy from conception to implantation is to obscure the reality that all hormonal contraceptives are potentially abortifacient. According to the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, pregnancy only begins when an embryo implants in the uterine lining, so that causing the death of a week-old child by means that include blocking implantation is not an abortion. But embryos who were unable to implant, they will die. And the three most common forms of emergency contraception, where you're talking about Plan B or whatever, all of them can act to prevent implantation. That, ladies and gentlemen, is not preventing pregnancy. It is causing an abortion. Focal Point AFR Talk.